Hello, everyone. It's Cassandra Williamson, and I am the Executive Director with Transgender Diverse Veterans of America Action Group. And this is definitely the Action Group side of things. I'm glad you're with us today, and thank you so much for being here. There's a couple of announcements we need to make, and a couple of things we're going to be talking about. And so, with that, let's roll the intro. Okay, so as you can see across the bottom of the screen right now, there is a disclaimer going across there, scrolling across, and I want to make it very clear that the opinions expressed here are mine and mine alone. They do not necessarily represent those of any particular organization, agency, department, whatever. They're my opinions, okay? And if you're under the age of 18, you don't need to be in this program, so leave, find something else to do. All right, with that, let's jump right in. As most of you already know, authoritarianism actually had a big win last night in Iowa. And so we know that that's coming. We know what that's all about. And so on the conservative side of things, we know exactly where it's headed. And with, I think, 51% of the vote, Trump picked up the caucus vote in Iowa. Now he's headed off to New Hampshire. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I just wanted to point that out if you didn't already know that. I'm sure you did. Everybody knows. But anyway, that's just, complete. It seems like it's a complete buy-in into that authoritarianism that we've been talking about for quite some time now. So what else do we want to talk about today? First, we'll get some announcements out of the way. We are having an executive leaders meeting tomorrow night, 8 Eastern time. It'll be right here. It'll be on Teams, and our executive leaders will be on that meeting. I hope everyone can attend and participate in that. Thursday evening, we have a general membership meeting. Also, I'm expecting our chair of the chair of the C3 side, our charity side, Sarah Cassandra, is flying into Charleston, West Virginia, and I'll be picking her up, taking her to a hotel. Then she and I have lots of work to do this coming week, so she and I'll be together covering lots of different things. And I think she wants to go eat some wild boar. That's what she told me, but this is not Arkansas, this is Kentucky. Coonskin hat country. But anyway, just so you know, she's coming in, and we're going to be spending a couple of days just going over a lot of different things that we need to be discussing. And that's should be here Thursday, weather permitting. Let's put it that way. If everything kind of clears up, we've got like 6 inches of snow here in eastern Kentucky, maybe more than that. Even, I mean, it's just a lot of snow. I haven't seen this much snow in a long. So anyway, yeah, it's been real fascinating. I'm looking forward to meeting. This will be the first time I've met Sarah Cassandra, and I appreciate her flying in from New York to come down and be with us. So I'm in eastern Kentucky at the time. I'm up here. Helping out. That's what I do. That's what I love to do. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that people do, and encourage me to do that kind of thing. So with that in mind, I just want to say also next week on the 24th, actually I'll be in DC the 23rd, 24th, and then flying out on the 25th. And so the Heritage Foundation is having their Decade of Defense conference or discussion, I think is going to take place. Well, I know it's going to take place on the 24th at their headquarters in Washington, D.C. at 214 Massachusetts Avenue Northeast in Washington. They're doing that starting at noon Eastern. Then they have a reception from 1 to 2 or something like that, I believe is the way they're doing it. So with that, I do plan to be there. I hope some people will join with me. I know that our Vice President, Dr. Deakins, has planned to be there with me as well. I'm going to be actually picking her up if everything goes according to plan. Pick her up in Bluefield, West Virginia, and then drive right on up into D.C. so we can stand out there in front of the Heritage Foundation and say, "You're not listening to the veterans. You're refusing to hear us. You will not speak to us." They don't. But they're going to have a conversation about a decade of defense. And their biggest concern, obviously, is, they think the military has become this woke thing. But I'm going to tell you something. It's the most welcoming and most effective military in the world right now. And the people who are in there doing these things and serving our nation, like all of the veterans who are in this organization, we are dedicated and determined to do the right thing and to be there and to defend the Constitution of the United States. That's what we are doing. And that's why we stand here doing this today as well. See, I've got 2 comments over here. Hey, Junior, their voters are wanting, okay, yeah, Daddy Vlad. There you go, Junior. Junior is a friend of mine. I've had the pleasure and the honor to meet with Junior down in Alabama a couple of times, Junior Childers. So, yeah, I'm just going to leave that there for a second. Okay, so that's where we are at this point. So I will be up there, like I said, in D.C. From the evening of the 23rd through the evening of the 24th, and driving back on the 25th back to Eastern Kentucky. So those 2 nights, that afternoon, and then on the 24th, we're going to be protesting in front of the Heritage Foundation's headquarters. Like I said before, to let them know that they have refused to speak to us. They have absolutely just ignored us. And there's only one explanation for that. I mean, I've tried to reach out to all of them, all of the different talking heads over on that side, including Dr. Roberts, who's president of Heritage, Chris Rufo, Matt Walsh, you name it. If there's an organization out there that's been disparaging all the minorities in the country, well, then I've been wanting to speak to them. But I don't represent the narrative that they want presented. The people in this organization don't represent that narrative. I mean, goodness, we're veterans. Many of us have been, we've done lots of things over the years. We're highly skilled and trained in a lot of different stuff and things. And we've got some very, very, very intelligent and smart people doing great things right now in the world today who are in this community, who are veterans and on active duty in the military. I mean, Heritage and Rufo and Walsh and all those people, they refuse to talk with us. They just refuse to do so. And the reason for it is, like I said before, we don't fit their narrative. It would be really hard for them to put us up on stage and then acknowledge that we're veterans also, because that weakens the narrative they want to present, that we're all just a bunch of wackos and kooks and all that kind of stuff. We don't represent that narrative. So they aren't going to put us up there. Now, here's what we're seeing. We're seeing this trend that's taking place right now, too, because we've got, I think it was Chris Rufo and a couple others the other day. They were starting to go after some of the military people. They were starting to go after professionals. Libs of TikTok put up on there a United pilot this morning. I read one of their things. They had a United a pilot, a captain for United Airlines who happened to be trans and all this. And they're trying to make you think that these people aren't capable of doing their jobs. But that person's a captain who has been highly trained and skilled and been doing this job successfully for a long time. And being trans just happens to be part of who they are. It's not, it doesn't disqualify them. But that's what they're trying to present. They're trying to present this idea out there, but they're trying to attack now the professionals. And you're starting to see them try to do that, pull out some people and say, look at this, without saying anything about them, disparagingly or not. They put this image up on the screen and they just show them as being transgender. But at the same time, they're saying this person is a United Airlines pilot. Surprisingly, many people may not realize this, but there's quite a few airline pilots who happen to be trans. Quite a few. I know quite a few of them. I know, and I've got friends active duty military, a space scientist, friend of mine, right now, a colonel in the Space Force. So I've got another good friend I had an opportunity to meet down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, just this past, I think it was November, somewhere around there. Anyway, we got to meet down there, and she is a person like me who happens to be a commander in the United States Navy and flies F-18s. Okay. And another friend of mine happens to be a commander in the Navy, happens to be a supply corps officer. And I mean, we're everything. And one person I know is retired from the Coast Guard who was a captain in the Coast Guard. So you can't, they can't go after us for who we are and what we've accomplished. So what they're trying to do is, make you think that there is a problem with them being trans, when in fact that is not. Because what's happened is, when they were hiding the trans part of their life, that was the thing that weakened them and made them less than what they were capable. Once they became themselves fully, completely, and told the world who they were, then what happens is that is no longer a concern in their lives. We're not out here doing stupid crap. We're fully capable now of focusing every bit of our energy, effort, and everything about us toward that job and doing it well. And that's just the way it is, folks. Just the way it is. And we're all living our lives the way that we now feel like we've got to the place where we're happy with who we are. So we don't have to worry about those things anymore. We're not focused on something else now. We're actually doing the job. We're in every branch of the service. As a matter of fact, if you look back, one of the biggest employers of transgender people happens to be the United States military. And that was the case long before people even realized we were there. Long before then. Always have been there, folks. We've always been there. Why? Because, one, many of us wanted to go out and prove something to someone. Prove this or prove that or prove this. It's just, and the strangest part is, we happen to go towards the things that are macho, centric kind of stuff. We go for that. we go into those things, just to try to prove something, and ultimately that's not going to work. But thank goodness we can get past all that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm pulling together all of as many people as I can. I don't know how many will show up in DC. I have no earthly idea. I know that I'm picking Dr. Deacons up and going with her up to there. Actually, she's going with me. And others have said they'll be there. They're going to be available. And I'm just hoping we can do that. I don't care if we have a bunch of signs. It's a sidewalk thing. We have to stay on the sidewalk. That's what the rules are for not having a permit in DC. So we can actually go stand on the sidewalk. If it's 3, 4, 5 people, I don't know, just get something up there and get the media with us, anything like that. And the focus is going to be on the fact that Heritage, Rufo, and all these other organizations, all the 80 plus organizations that have signed on to Project 2025 with Heritage Foundation, all those organizations, we want them to know we're here, and we will be seen and will be heard, and we're going to do it in a peaceful way. And we're not going to be idiots out there. We're not. And that's one of the things anyone who goes with us up there to DC, anyone who participates in this event in DC, the moment someone does something stupid, I will call you out. Just to be clear, okay? Just to be very clear. We're not going to have a bunch of people up there just going off the wall and being crazy. We're not there for that. We're veterans who happen to be also trans. That's trans part is just secondary. But it's the important part that actually we want to focus and drive Heritage to see that, hey, look, we're here. You're not going to ignore us. I've actually been in their headquarters, and some of you know this. You've seen some of the pictures that I took there. I was there on November 21st, I believe it was, of 2023. I walked into their headquarters and introduced myself to the people at the front desk, and it was really. I wanted to talk to Dr. Roberts, and some of the people said, "Hey, look, there's a little break room up here if you want to go up and wait for a minute for the receptionist to come back down and all that. It's all up there. You can go up there and do what, So it was very welcoming for me to go in there, and then the receptionist came back, and it took another 5 minutes before they told me, "Hey, Dr. Roberts is not available." But I'm not surprised. I wasn't surprised at all. I'd love to be able to go knock on Stephen Miller's door. I think his offices are there in DC, and I'll have some time to do that. I may do that too. I'm going to try to go after our biggest nemesis happens to be the Heritage Foundation, because they're the ones driving the narrative that's against us across this whole country right now. They're the one that's setting the stage, setting the narrative for getting rid of people like us. And if you don't believe that's the case, well, all you have to do is go take a look at Project 2025 and read the foreword that Dr. Roberts wrote in that 920-page thing. Just read the foreword. Go down through page 4 and 5. Bottom of page 4, top of page 5. They tell you exactly what they want to do. And I know that what their whole idea is this color blindness. They want to be able to get to the place where this whole country is colorblind. That's an aspirational goal. It's very Pollyannish too, though, because it's not achievable. It's not going to happen. But they want to get that way. But their version of color blindness isn't just not being able to see, hear, or see anybody. It's also assimilation. They want to bring you in and force you to be just like what they want you to be. And it's an assimilation thing. It's colorblindness with assimilation attached to it. And, it's just as wrong as you cannot pretend that there are no problems within these minority populations in the country, whether it's racial or ethnic or whatever. You can't pretend that. But they want to. They want to pretend there are no problems in those communities. And that's very stated very clearly in Project 2025 and this mandate for leadership for the new president, if it's a conservative person, takes over and wins and stands up there on the stage and says, "So help me God," on January the 20th of 2025. Whoever does that, if a conservative, they get handed this document that they've already bought into, and they'll take it and then readjust the entire federal government to make it colorblind as much as they possibly can. And that means removing words they don't like. Let me show you which words they don't like to hear. They don't want to see these words or hear these words or the people associated with them. So hold on a second. Let me go share the screen. Go over to here, and I'm sharing the screen now. What you're looking at is Project 2025. This is a mandate for leadership, a promise, conservative promise, and it's a presidential transition project produced by the Heritage Foundation in 2023. Right there, you got the whole thing out. And I'm going to scroll down through until I get to the forward. Oh, and this is actually not the forward, but it's just a note on Project 2025. It's very at the very beginning, the second paragraph. The second paragraph, folks. History teaches the president's power to implement an agenda is at its apex during the administration's opening days. To execute requires a well-conceived, coordinated, unified plan and a trained and committed cadre of personnel to implement it. And so they're telling you right now, they've already set up these training academies. They've already brought people in. They're preparing to take over the whole of government just as soon as that conservative president takes over on January the 20th, 2025. The very first thing that person will have to do is sign on to the executive order or write the executive order that implements Schedule F that President Trump had done at the end of his administration. Schedule F allows it declares that many of the leaders, many of the people within the administrative part of the executive branch, that they're hired at will, meaning they can be fired at will and hired at will and replaced with whatever crony they want to put in there. And that's exactly what they're going to do. If they get that opportunity, Schedule F's the first thing. It becomes an executive order right off the bat. It gets taken care of. So they can get rid of people they don't like and put in people they do like, replacing people who are actually knowledgeable in the field with somebody who is, I don't know, maybe a farmer from the middle of Iowa with a small farm who grows tomatoes or whatever, who has absolutely no idea how to run the energy department. Stuff like that. So, but the Schedule F now allows them to go and clean house, put in whoever they want. And it will be very much just like what Andrew Jackson did when he was president. He put all of his family in different places, friends in, everybody who supported him. He put all those people in. And then what happened? The U.S. was in decline, economic decline for 10 years after that. It took that long, at least, just to clean up the mess that Jackson had created. Phew. So, yeah, let's go on down. Now I'm going to go down to the forward. And getting closer. Contributors, we'll get past the contributors. There's a bunch of them. You recognize most of the names if you take a look at them. Okay, so the forward. Here's the forward to Project 2025, folks. And this is a promise to America by Dr. Kevin Roberts, who has a PhD in early American history. And this is page one. This is page one, the numeral 1 page. of this document, the first page. The rest were the Roman numeral identified pages. But look what happens here in the very first, in the second paragraph. Okay? The second paragraph of this foreword by Dr. Roberts, he tells you what he's going to do. It tells you what he's focused on. The second paragraph. See, now, let me give you a little history about this. Heritage Foundation has been around for 50 years. Well, 50 years in 2023. Their very first mandate for leadership was given to Ronald Reagan, who had already previously bought into the idea, but they handed it over to him when he said, "So help me God," on January 20th of 1981. So when he did that, when he said that, they handed him their very first mandate for leadership, and Reagan was able to accomplish about 60%, 67% of it within the first 180 days. Okay. To Heritage Foundation of today, that was a failure. One, it wasn't as well organized, and it didn't have the beautiful, this Project 2025, the mandate for leadership for this coming election cycle. This thing is very well thought out. It's in-depth. It's got detail about every agency, department, and office within the executive branch, what needs to happen, who needs to do it, and how it needs to be done. That's all listed and stated within that thing at the very beginning, okay? And the 920 pages, it covers every one of those things, from the CIA to the Department of Veterans Affairs and everything in between and around. It covers it all. But now, so in the second paragraph of the foreword by Dr. Roberts, he already starts talking about some things in here. So let me just say this. I'm going to read the paragraph to you. Today, American conservative movement are enduring an era of division and danger akin to the 1970s. And I lived in the 1970s, and I don't recall it being that bad. Okay. Wholesale dishonesty and corruption. Okay. I guess they failed to see that the person they're attaching their wagon to has been a con man since way back. I remember reading about him in 1980 when I was a freshman at the Naval Academy. Okay. He was a con man, still a con today. Okay, look at America under the ruling class and cultural elite today. Well, look, the people who are writing this thing, they are also the ruling class and cultural elite. But they don't want you to think of them that way. Inflation's ravaging the family budgets. Yeah, it absolutely is. It's coming down, but the cost of it has already gone up so high that many of us are feeling that out here. And then they also say drug overdose deaths continue to escalate. And yeah, that's true too. So you got two true statements right here. And then the next statement, and let's see right here, they say inflation is ravaging family budgets, overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism. So let me tell you something. Just because the first two statements are somewhat true, it doesn't mean the third one is. But they're trying to use this psychological warfare technique. It's psyop stuff. If A is true and B is true, then C must be true. Well, in fact, in this case, A is partially true and B is mostly true, but C is false. Period. False. And that is in the second paragraph, folks. And then it says, moreover, right here, low-income communities are drowning in addiction and government dependence. Okay, so let me just stop right there a second to tell you that it's not just low-income communities. This kind of addiction and stuff, it is in every socioeconomic group in this country. But they want to get the low-income communities in there because they've always been after them. So contemporary elites have repurposed the worst ingredients of 1970s radical chic to build the totalitarian cult known today as the Great Awakening. And I find that to be hilarious. For one thing, whenever Roberts wrote this, he put radical chic in there. He didn't give a proper reference for it. He plagiarized that one. Radical chic came from, I think it was Tom Wolfe in 1970. He's the one who coined that term, but nowhere in here does Dr. Roberts actually give credit to Tom Wolfe for saying that and putting it down. Okay. Anyway, plagiarism, anyone? All right. So, and the Great Awakening is just hilarious to start out with. All right. So let's go on. That was on page 1, folks, of the foreword. Now let's scroll right on down to page 4. Top of page 4. We start seeing some of this stuff. This is Promise 1. Restore the family, the centerpiece of American life, and protect our children. Look, every time, down through history, down through history. If you go back to the 30s, or actually, let's just go all the way back to 1880s and 1890s, when the Chinese were here and they were the biggest population helping us build the railroads. Well, at some point, people got mad about that, and they were saying they're taking all of our jobs. And then, so what did they do? They started dehumanizing the Chinese people who were building those roads. They said they're after your children, they want to destroy your families, and they're taking your jobs. That's the 1880s and 90s, the same stuff we see today. And how did they do it? They scapegoat a particular group of people. And also, just so you get a good, clear idea about this, people were saying then, oh, look, the Chinese are coming through the southern border. In 1890s, they were saying that. In the 1890s, there's stories about this. We got to do something about that southern border. And then they said, there's disease coming across the southern border. It's infecting our cattle down here in Texas and Arizona and New Mexico. 1890s and 1903, in that period of time, right there, same stuff. It just boggles the mind. But anyway, it's a continuous long-term trope that they go after these populations and denigrate them and then scapegoat them, and their target is they're going to infect the women and children every time because they want to rile people up about something. And that's what they've done with this. Done the same thing. But it didn't stop with the Chinese, folks. It also went into the Latino communities in the early part of the 20th century. They went in there. They went after them then, too. Coming across. Nobody's securing the border down here. Well, yeah, the border was wide open. It had been wide open forever. There were a few fences put up in the early 1900s that kind of, the idea was to keep the Mexican cows from coming across into Arizona and Texas with they had a disease, a tick-borne disease. And that's understandable there. You want to keep that separated. You want to keep that out of the country. But that same disease was also in northern Texas, too. So it was already there. But there's just so much like this all the time. They're always looking to scapegoat someone to get you to do something that they think you should be doing for them. You know, all these people are just trying to, power. It's power. It's all about power. Okay. And then what do they do here? I mean, let's just go back in the 40s and 50s. What happened then? We saw the military began integrating Black Americans into the military. Prior to that, they had their own separate units. They were separated. You had the Black Panzer, the Black tank battalions in the Army. You had the Tuskegee Airmen, who were just a bunch of Americans who were really good, but they put them in one group because they didn't want to blend them in with the white people in the military. Why? The same arguments were used then about this. We don't want those Black people around all the white people, and particularly around any children and women. Same argument. Used then as today. And they continued with that trope about that all the way up through the 50s and 60s and stuff. You don't want to integrate all these. We heard that with the segregation stuff. And George Wallace standing in the schoolhouse door down in Alabama saying, no to integration, no, supporting segregation, that kind of stuff. But, and the same arguments were used then. They'd call it, we don't want all of our women and children around all these big, dangerous Black people. They said it then. And then in the 50s, you also had the Lavender Scare, where 20,000 federal employees were let go simply because they were gay or lesbian. In the 50s, the Lavender Scare, folks. And really all they had to do was just say, hey, look, everybody knew that there was no problem with these people. What'd they do? How'd they get the whole country to buy into that? Well, they said they used the same thing they had done with the Chinese and the Blacks and the Latinos and all that kind of stuff. They said, we don't want them around our children and our women, and we don't want them to be representative of us around the world or whatever. So they made them into a big, scary monster, and then they were able to fire about 20,000 of them. Lavender Scare in the 1950s, right? Same kind of stuff that we're seeing today going after LGBT people and transgender people. Same stuff, same thing, scapegoating someone just so that they can get the power they want. Completely ignoring the fact that all they had to do was just say, hey, there's nothing wrong with these people. Just let them be, let them live. And the whole thing was the people who were attacking them during the Lavender Scare, they're the ones who were going, this could be a big problem out here. We don't want them out in the community and all this kind of stuff. We want to shove them into the closet, make them hide. But all they had to do then was just say, hey, look, we're going to stand beside these Americans. They're Americans too. They have every right to experience and be part of the blessings of liberty that every other American is supposed to have. If they had done that, there would have been none of the issues. No, there have been no problems. That's all they had to do. But yet, they needed to scapegoat someone so that this other group could be in power. And that's really all it was about. Same thing today, folks. So they're going after the weakest, not the weakest, but the least populous numbers in the country, just to say that, look, these are the people causing all the problems. Hitler did it in Germany with the Jews. That is also Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda master of Hitler in Germany. What did he do? From 1929 all the way up through 1945, before the end of the war, World War II, that's what Goebbels was doing and Hitler was doing, and different people within the German Reich. They scapegoated the Jewish people, rounded them up and shot them, killed 6 million in the Holocaust, and just vilified the Jewish people, blamed them for all their ills. Well, guess what? They're doing the same thing with another population of people today. And it just never ends. They always punch down. They're always punching down to someone that they can think of as being less than or whatever, to focus all of their energy on, so that you can't see what the right hand is doing when the left hand is striking someone. I mean, that's what it's all about, folks. This kind of hatred, this kind of the anti-Semitism kind of stuff, that's not new. We see that today on college campuses when you see these students who are out here standing up for Palestine and doing all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? In the 1930s, it was going on college campuses then too. And who were the people who were mostly on those campuses at that time? Well, obviously it was the Great Depression, so most of the people who didn't have money weren't there. It was the upper class white people who were students on those campuses, and they were the ones protesting. They were the ones who actually did say this in the 1930s. They wanted to make sure that the military wasn't recruiting people from Ivy League schools and different schools around the country. They were there then. But to say that this is all new now is just, well, ignoring history, or willfully ignoring history, or not having looked at history. I don't know. It just kind of is baffling. But then you've got to be willing to actually go out and pursue this kind of information in order to get to that point. So the first point is, and the first promise, and I'm going to close after reading this section down through here, and then come back and see if there are any comments to address. This is what Dr. Roberts wrote. This is on page 4, as I said, top of page 4. Okay, the next conservative president must get to work pursuing the true priority of politics, the well-being of the American family. And obviously that definition of family is, well, they tell you what it is, right on down through here. Okay, in many ways, the entire point of centralizing political power is to subvert the family. No, the entire point of centralizing political power is power, not to subvert the family. All you have to do is look through history to see that too, but they don't want you to think about that. Its purpose is to replace people's natural loves and loyalties with unnatural ones. You see this in the popular left-wing aphorism, government is simply the name we give to things we choose to do together. Well, look, this whole paragraph is bull. That is not what the government's all about. And by the way, when you have two people standing together, you have to have some agreement between them. And when you have 4 or 5 people standing together creating a community, well, guess what? You institute some kind of rules of engagement between each other. You have, expected behaviors and all that kind of stuff. That's anyway. And then they do this. Then they'd say this. The name real people give to the things we do together as community. Now look, real people, isn't it this term, the real people part there that's right here? We're all real people. That's like saying having organic food. If it's food, well, shoot. Oh, okay. Anyway, we're all real people. But they're trying to draw this distinction here. As some people aren't real people, when in fact we're all real people. But no, it gets worse. I mean, this is just the top of page 4. On down to the bottom of page 4, they tell you what they want to do. Let's go on, man. All right. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. And that just cracks me up every time you say that. I'd prefer to be enlightened than not enlightened. However, that's them. They can believe what they will. And those of us who are veterans or active in the military, we serve for them to have the right to say and believe these things, period. And so I don't want to hear any of us on our side saying they're not real people or they're not real Americans. They are, period, flat out. Just don't go down that road with them. Let them be the ones to say stuff like that. And they will. Right on down the page. This starts with this, and this is Dr. Roberts. And this is a very militant statement. And I'll show you why in a second. This starts with deleting the term. Don't so you can read when it's dark. This starts with deleting the term sexual orientation, gender identity, which, parenthetically, that's SOGI. Diversity, equity, inclusion, gender equality, equity, or gender awareness, sensitivity, all these kind of terms down through your, it just goes on and on and on. And then they put a comma at the end of all that. And any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, regulation, contract, grant, piece of legislation that exists, period. All right. What about those of us who are Americans also, but in these communities? Are they just ignoring the fact that they're wanting to deprive us of our First Amendment rights too? Really? Really? That's what they just said right here. It's exactly what they said. And they prove the point in the next paragraph. But what do they want to remove all those terms from, all those people from? For instance, grants. I'm going to get off here in a few minutes. I've got another program at 1 o'clock. But let's just take grants. So if you go in and remove SOGI, or sexual orientation, gender identity, you go in and remove gender from any kind of conversation in the whole of the federal government. You remove all those terms, diversity and equity, inclusion, all those kind of terms. You remove them, and you can't use those terms in the federal government. And you say they're going to remove them from every grant out there. Well, guess what happens? All that scientific research with professionals who know what they are doing, all that research out there that is showing you the social determinants of health that each minority population experiences, and that some of these populations experience them in an intersectional way. It compounds each other because of the intersecting identities that they have. You could be black and trans, and it's worse for a black trans person than it is for a white trans person. And their social determinants of health, things like access to healthcare and all that, it's worse. But if you can't study it, then you can't see it, you can't think about it, you can't talk about it, you can't do anything about it. NIH, National Institute for Health, has programs in place. And I know the doctors who are running these programs to determine those social determinants of health within sexual orientation and gender identity communities. And it's a very serious challenge and a problem. But yet, if you go in and remove all of that, where you can't even look at it, you can't identify it, you can't do any kind of research around that topic, then guess what happens? You can pretend they don't exist and there are no problems. That's color blindness, minority blindness. That's what that is. Go on down. And then they say, pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children. Let me tell you something. Here's what they want you to believe. That there is an omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology. Transgender people aren't an ideology. Conservatism is an ideology. Liberalism is an ideology. Communism is an ideology. Fascism is an ideology. But a person isn't a fascist person by definition. You can't just walk up and say fascist Joe or fascist whatever. That's not how that works. We are transgender regardless of the ideologies associated with that. Many of us in this community are very conservative. Many of us are also, liberals or libertarians or you name it. We cover every gamut of ideology and ideological belief system out there, just as the rest of America does too. Nothing in this says anything about that. They don't care. And this says, go scrolling on down through here. And it says, and it has no claim to First Amendment protections. And then it goes on to say that all these people ought to be put in jail. And the telecommunications company and technology firms that even talk about these topics should be shut down. I'm trying to figure out where the blessings of liberty and the First Amendment and the Constitution, how you can actually say that certain Americans aren't entitled to those same protections as anyone else. It just blows the mind. But anyway, that's what they're doing. This is a narrative that's being presented. It is prevalent in everything. And with that, I want to close and just remind you that we do have a, let me stop sharing and go back to where I can see me and you. And oops, there. And no comments, but we got some viewers out there. Appreciate you being here. But all those things, all the things that's coming up, just to close out. Remember, we do have an executive leadership meeting tomorrow night. We have a general membership meeting on Thursday night, both of which are at 8 Eastern. And also, I'm going to be in DC next week. And if you're free to be there, please do so. Come out on the 24th. Join me in front of the Heritage Foundation's headquarters. And with that, we will close the show down with our outro.